So many questions. Why is the world spinning? Why is the moon keeping its orbit? Can rockets fly backwards? The facts you didn't know you needed. The Useless Show.
During early pregnancy, the brain doesn't just grow, it sprints. Neurons form at a rate of 250,000 per minute, which means in the time it takes to make a cup of tea, millions of brain cells have already come into a charming family tradition or an organizational nightmare, depending on who you ask. Every single minute, roughly 750 milliliters of blood, about the volume of a standard wine bottle, flows through your brain. That accounts for 15 to 20% of the heart's entire output, directed to an organ that makes up only about 2% of your body weight. The brain is essentially a very expensive and demanding house guest. The human brain is approximately 75% water, which makes dehydration a surprisingly direct threat to cognition. Even mild fluid loss, around 2% of body weight, can noticeably impair concentration and memory. That means the advice to drink more water isn't just general wellness talk. It's structurally relevant to how the brain physically functions. Mayflies live for only about 24 hours as adults, which sounds tragic until you consider how efficiently they use the time. They hatch, mate, lay eggs, and die, all within a single day. They don't even have functional mouths in their adult stage, because eating simply isn't on the agenda. The entire adult phase exists for one purpose only. When a fly takes off, it doesn't leap forward. It jumps backward. Research from Caltech found that flies push off with their middle legs in the opposite direction of their intended flight path, then pivot in the air. It's a counterintuitive maneuver that happens faster than the human eye can track, which is partly why swatting a fly head-on almost never works. Phobos, one of Mars' 2 moons, orbits the planet so quickly that it completes a full loop in just 7.6 hours, faster than Mars itself rotates. The result is that from the Martian surface, Phobos rises in the west and sets in the east, the reverse of what you'd expect. It also orbits so low that it's invisible from the Martian poles entirely. Kangaroos have been observed consuming cat feces, which is notable because the compound responsible, a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii, is toxic to them. Why they do it isn't fully understood. It's one of those animal behaviors that sits in the uncomfortable gap between instinct and poor decision-making, and researchers are still working out the details. For a stretch of prehistory, at least 4 distinct human species shared the planet simultaneously: Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo floresiensis, the last of which stood roughly 3.5 feet tall. They overlapped in time and, in some cases, interbred. Modern humans of non-African descent still carry traces of Neanderthal DNA as a result. The 3-note NBC chime, GEC, is one of the most recognized audio signatures in American broadcasting, trademarked in 1950. What fewer people know is that a 4th note was historically added as an alert signal for breaking news. The notes were originally played live by a musician, and the sequence was carefully chosen for its recognizability across different radio qualities. Cows have eyes positioned on the sides of their heads, giving them a visual field of nearly 360 degrees. They can see almost everything around them without turning their heads. The trade-off is depth perception. The narrow area where both eyes overlap is limited, which makes judging distances in front of them less precise than it is for forward-facing animals like humans. The vast majority of spider species pose no real threat to humans and, in fact, tend to avoid contact. Most will flee rather than engage when approached, and biting is generally a last resort, used only when directly handled or threatened. Given that spiders consume enormous quantities of insects annually, their instinct to avoid humans works out well for both parties. Whale feces is typically orange in color, which surprised researchers when they first began studying it in earnest. It's rich in iron and nitrogen, and because it floats, unlike the whales themselves, it plays a meaningful role in ocean ecosystems, fertilizing the surface water where phytoplankton grows. It is, in a very real sense, one of the ocean's more underappreciated resources. German chocolate cake has nothing to do with Germany. It's named after Sam German, an American baker who in 1852 developed a mild sweet baking chocolate for the Baker's Chocolate Company. The recipe bearing his name appeared in a Dallas newspaper in 1957, became wildly popular, and the capitalization of German eventually led generations of people to assume a European origin. The word corgi comes directly from Welsh, meaning roughly dwarf dog, a fitting description for a breed with famously short legs and a long body. In Welsh mythology, the story goes further. Corgis were believed to be the preferred mounts of fairies, and the markings on their backs were said to be left by fairy saddles and harnesses. The central figure in Edvard Munch's 1893 painting The Scream isn't screaming. The figure is actually covering their ears in reaction to a scream they're hearing. Munch wrote in his diary that he felt an infinite scream passing through nature while on a walk. And the painting captures that sensation of being overwhelmed by something external, not the act of crying out. Platypuses are among the very few venomous mammals. Males have spurs on their hind legs, capable of delivering venom strong enough to kill small animals and cause severe, long-lasting pain in humans. The venom is not well understood by the body's pain systems, meaning standard analgesics often don't work on it. It's an unusual feature for an animal that's already biologically surprising in several other ways. Australia, at roughly 4,000 kilometers wide, is wider than the moon's diameter of about 3,474 kilometers. The moon, of course, is a sphere, so its total surface area is far larger. But that single east to west measurement catches most people off guard. It's one of those comparisons that makes Australia feel genuinely vast rather than just theoretically large on a map. The human eye has its own immune system that operates separately from the body's general immune response, a phenomenon called immune privilege. This exists because the eye's internal structures can't afford the inflammation that typically comes with immune activity. If that barrier breaks down and the main immune system gets access, it may identify the eye's tissue as foreign and begin attacking it. The name Caesar in classical Latin was pronounced closer to Kaiser than the modern English version. As Rome's influence spread and its language evolved, that pronunciation carried into German as Kaiser and into Russian as Tsar, both words meaning king or emperor. A name that began with one Roman family eventually became the root word for monarchs across two different empires. From Earth, the sun appears yellow or orange, especially near the horizon, due to the way the atmosphere scatters shorter wavelengths of light. In space, with no atmosphere to filter it, the sun is actually white, emitting roughly equal amounts of all visible wavelengths. Astronauts and space photography both confirm this, though the yellow association is deeply ingrained in how most people picture it. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, fought on August 27, 1896, lasted somewhere between 38 and 45 minutes, the shortest recorded war in history. It began when the new Sultan of Zanzibar refused to step down at British insistence, and ended when the palace was shelled and his forces surrendered. The entire conflict was essentially over before most people would have heard it had started. Before trees evolved, the dominant tall organisms on land were fungi. Around 420 million years ago, during the Silurian period, a fungus called prototaxites grew up to 8 meters tall, taller than most modern trees, and may have covered vast stretches of the landscape. It wasn't until plants developed woody tissue that trees eventually overtook fungi as the primary large land organism. For roughly 60 million years after trees first evolved, wood simply didn't decompose. No organism had yet developed the ability to break down lignin, the tough polymer that gives wood its structure. Dead trees accumulated in enormous quantities across the planet, a period sometimes called the Carboniferous, and much of what became today's coal deposits originated from that undecomposed wood. Honeybees can be trained to detect both landmines and illegal drugs, thanks to their highly sensitive olfactory systems. Researchers have used a method called Pavlovian conditioning, associating the scent of explosives or narcotics with a food reward, to get bees to hover near buried mines or hidden substances. They can cover large areas quickly and are far less conspicuous than trained dogs. Alpacas born with blue eyes have a high rate of congenital deafness, a pattern also seen in other animals, including cats and dogs with the same coloring. The connection is linked to a lack of pigment-producing cells in both the iris and the inner ear, where those cells play a role in hearing function. The blue eyes themselves are a symptom of the same underlying pigmentation issue. Botanically speaking, a banana qualifies as a berry. It develops from a single flower with one ovary and contains seeds embedded in its flesh. A strawberry, by the same definition, is not a berry at all. It's an accessory fruit grown from the fleshy base of the flower rather than the ovary itself. Most people find this unsettling, which is a reasonable reaction. A Tasmanian devil gives birth to as many as 40 tiny joeys at a time, each about the size of a grain of rice. They all race to reach the mother's pouch simultaneously, but she only has 4 nipples, so only the first 4 to arrive survive. It's one of nature's more direct examples of competition as a survival mechanism, beginning within minutes of birth. Ferruccio Lamborghini was a successful tractor manufacturer who owned a Ferrari and was unhappy with its clutch. When he went to Enzo Ferrari directly with his complaint, Ferrari reportedly told him that a tractor maker had no business advising a sports car engineer. Lamborghini's response was to start building his own sports cars, and the first model, the 350 GT, debuted in 1964. Before becoming the soft-spoken host of The Joy of Painting, Bob Ross served in the U.S. Air Force for 20 years, rising to the rank of Master Sergeant. Part of his role involved being the kind of authority figure who had to yell at people regularly. He later said he vowed that if he ever left that job, he would never raise his voice again. And he didn't. Some scientists have proposed that early photosynthesis may have used retinol, the same molecule involved in human vision, rather than chlorophyll. If true, ancient photosynthetic organisms would have absorbed green light and reflected red and purple wavelengths, potentially giving early Earth a distinctly purple appearance. This idea, sometimes called the purple Earth hypothesis, remains an active area of scientific discussion. When you look at a star, you're not seeing it as it exists now. You're seeing light that left it years, centuries, or even thousands of years ago, depending on the distance. The Andromeda Galaxy, visible to the naked eye, appears as it was 2.5 million years ago. In a very literal sense, stargazing is the same thing as looking backward through time. A housefly doesn't chew its food. It can only consume liquids. When it lands on solid food, it regurgitates digestive fluid onto the surface to dissolve it, then drinks the resulting liquid back up. This process sometimes involves consuming what it has already partially digested before. It is thorough, if not particularly refined, as a feeding strategy. Studies have consistently found that arachnophobia, fear of spiders, ranks among the most common phobias globally, often surpassing the fear of death in surveys. This is partly because death feels abstract and distant, while a spider in the corner of the room is immediate and visible. The fear response to spiders appears in very young children, suggesting a possible evolutionary component. A champagne cork leaves the bottle at speeds up to 50 miles per hour and can travel several meters with enough force to cause serious eye injury or, in documented cases, death. Despite this, very few people are meaningfully afraid of champagne. Spiders, which kill almost no one in most parts of the world, generate far more anxiety. A gap that says something interesting about how humans assess risk. It's physically impossible for most people to lick their own elbow. The geometry simply doesn't work. The forearm is too long and the tongue can't reach the joint. The more interesting phenomenon is what happens right after someone reads that sentence. The immediate, involuntary attempt to try anyway. You probably just did. Research has found a correlation between higher levels of zinc and copper in hair samples and certain markers of cognitive ability. These trace minerals play roles in neurotransmitter function and neural signaling. The relationship isn't fully understood, and hair mineral analysis remains a contested diagnostic tool, but the pattern between mineral concentration and cognitive measures has appeared across multiple studies. Fans of Seinfeld have made it something of a sport to spot the hidden Superman in every episode. A figure, a poster, a toy on a shelf, somewhere in each installment the Man of Steel appears. It's a quiet tribute from co-creator Jerry Seinfeld, who has been an avid Superman fan since childhood. Once you know to look, you can't watch an episode the same way again. Possums have one of the shortest pregnancies in the animal kingdom at just 16 days. To put that in perspective, a human pregnancy is roughly 18 times longer. What possums lack in gestation time, they make up for with an extended pouch phase. Newborns are essentially embryos at birth and spend months developing externally, attached to a nipple inside the mother's pouch. The shortest human pregnancy to result in a healthy baby was 22 weeks and 6 days, just over 5 months. That's nearly 4 months earlier than a full-term birth. The infant, born in the mid-2000s in Miami, weighed less than 10 ounces at birth and was roughly the length of a standard ballpoint pen. She survived and, by most accounts, developed normally. The platypus is one of the few venomous mammals, and its venom is no mild inconvenience. The compounds it delivers are more potent than a rattlesnake's in terms of the pain response they trigger, and uniquely resistant to standard pain medication. Males deliver it through spurs on their hind legs, typically during breeding season, suggesting it's more about competition than defense. The youngest mother in verified medical history was Lina Medina of Peru, who gave birth in 1939 at just 5 years old, a case documented by doctors and still considered one of medicine's most extraordinary anomalies. Butterfly wings span an extraordinary range of sizes. On the smaller end, the western pygmy blue measures around 1/8 of an inch across, roughly the size of a fingernail. On the other end, the Queen Alexander's birdwing of Papua New Guinea reaches nearly 12 inches, wide enough to cover a dinner plate. Both are butterflies. It has been a standard part of diets across Africa, Asia, Australia, the Middle East, and the Americas for centuries. Insects are protein-dense, rich in vitamins and minerals, and require significantly fewer resources to raise than conventional livestock. About 2 billion people worldwide eat them regularly. If you place a grape in a microwave, it will explode, and the reason is surprisingly well documented. In 2019, physicists published a study explaining that the grape's size and water content cause it to focus microwave energy into a plasma arc between the two halves. It's a genuine physics demonstration that also happens to make a mess, which is probably why it keeps getting rediscovered. The Ramses brand of condoms takes its name from Ramses II, the ancient Egyptian pharaoh who ruled for 66 years and is believed to have fathered somewhere between 96 and 160 children. The branding is either a bold endorsement of the product's reliability or a subtle cautionary tale, depending on how you choose to read it. The average commercially produced chocolate bar contains trace amounts of insect parts. The FDA permits up to 60 insect fragments per 100 grams of chocolate. 8 insect legs per bar is a commonly cited approximation. This isn't contamination in the dramatic sense. Cocoa beans are harvested and processed in environments where insects are simply present, and complete separation isn't realistically achievable at scale. An old law in York, England, technically permits a person to shoot a Scotsman with a bow and arrow within the city walls, except on Sundays, when the exemption doesn't apply. Legal scholars generally classify this as a historical statute that was never formally repealed rather than enforceable law. It's the kind of footnote that survives less because of legal relevance and more because it's genuinely difficult to forget. The claim that people swallow an average of 8 spiders in their lifetime during sleep has circulated for decades, but it is almost certainly false. Spiders avoid warm, breathing, vibrating surfaces. A sleeping human is essentially every warning signal a spider has, amplified. The statistic appears to have originated as an example of how readily people accept implausible facts, which gives it a certain ironic quality. The Beetham Tower in Manchester, completed in 2006 at a cost of over £150 million, stands 47 floors tall and remains one of the tallest buildings outside London in the United Kingdom. It houses both a Hilton hotel and residential apartments, stacked vertically in the same structure. It also became locally famous for the humming noise its blade-like top produces in strong winds. Stewardesses is frequently cited as the longest common English word typed entirely with the left hand on a standard QWERTY keyboard. At 11 letters, it uses only keys from the left side: S, T, E, E, W, A, R, D, E, S, S, E, S. It's a satisfying coincidence of word length and keyboard geography that typewriting enthusiasts have noted since at least the mid-20th century. The average person loses around 50 to 100 hairs per day under normal circumstances, though some estimates put the upper range closer to 200. Hair loss at this rate is routine. Each strand is in a continuous growth cycle, and shedding is part of it. Noticeably higher loss can signal nutritional deficiencies, stress, or hormonal changes, which is why the baseline number is medically useful to know. Mexico City is sinking at a rate of roughly 10 inches per year in some areas, and in certain neighborhoods, the cumulative subsidence over the past century has exceeded 30 feet. The cause is the over-extraction of groundwater from the ancient lakebed the city was built on. As water is removed, the soft clay sediment compresses, and the city slowly descends into its own foundation. French law sets the legal drinking age at 18 and has done so since 2009. Prior to that, the limit was 16 for wine and beer. The idea that a 5-year-old can legally purchase alcohol in a French bar is not accurate under current or recent law. It appears to be a persistent piece of folklore that gets repeated often enough to feel credible, but doesn't hold up to legal scrutiny. During the chariot race sequence in the 1959 epic Ben-Hur, one of the most celebrated action sequences in Hollywood history, a red vehicle is reportedly visible in the background of one shot. Whether it's a car, a piece of equipment, or an artifact of the film's condition has been debated. But the claim has circulated among film trivia enthusiasts for decades as one of cinema's more embarrassing continuity errors. During World War II, material rationing extended even to the Academy Awards. In 1943, the Oscar statuettes were cast from painted plaster rather than the usual metal alloy, as bronze and other materials were redirected toward the war effort. Recipients were later offered the option to exchange their plaster figures for proper metal ones once restrictions lifted, and most did. If you find yourself sinking in quicksand, the correct response is to move slowly and lean back. By increasing your body's surface area and redistributing weight, you reduce the pressure pulling you down. Because quicksand is denser than the human body, you will naturally float if you stop struggling and lie back calmly. The physics work in your favor, provided panic doesn't override them. Postage stamps in Israel go through rabbinical certification to confirm their adhesive is kosher, meaning the glue contains no animal-derived ingredients that would conflict with Jewish dietary law. Since stamps are licked, the adhesive technically qualifies as something that enters the mouth and therefore falls within the scope of kosher standards. It's a detail of religious law applied to a very modern object. A fully developed hurricane generates an almost incomprehensible amount of energy. Over the course of just 10 minutes, the heat released through its rainfall alone exceeds the total energy of every nuclear weapon ever built, combined. This figure refers specifically to thermal energy, not destructive force, but it illustrates why meteorologists treat large hurricanes with the same language usually reserved for geologic events. Around 100 people choke to death on ballpoint pens every year, according to figures that have circulated in medical and safety literature for decades. It sounds improbable, but pens are small, lightweight, and frequently end up in mouths, particularly among people who habitually chew them while thinking. The pen cap is the more common culprit, which is why many manufacturers now design caps with holes to allow airflow if swallowed. Some moths are genuinely fast flyers. Certain hawk moths, including the white-lined sphinx, have been recorded at speeds up to 25 miles per hour. That puts them among the fastest insects on the planet, comparable to a dragonfly and faster than most bees. Their speed is partly a product of wing shape and rapid wing beat frequency, which can exceed 70 beats per second in some species. Butterfly imagery appears in Egyptian frescoes at Thebes dating back approximately 3,500 years, making them among the earliest known artistic depictions of the insect. The paintings suggest that ancient Egyptians observed and recorded the natural world around them with considerable attention to detail. Butterflies held symbolic significance in several ancient cultures, often associated with the soul or transformation, which may explain their early appearance in formal art. Progeria's physical effects, the hair loss, the aged skin, the cardiovascular deterioration, don't appear at birth. Infants with the condition look typical for the first year or so of life, with symptoms generally emerging between ages 2 and 6. This delayed onset means families often don't receive a diagnosis until well into early childhood, making the condition's progression feel sudden even when it's been quietly underway. The statistic that 14% of all facts and statistics are made up and that 27% of people are aware of this is itself a fabricated statistic, deployed deliberately as a demonstration of its own point. It's a self. Over an average lifetime, a man produces somewhere in the range of 14 to 18 quarts of semen in total. The figure sounds large until you consider it's spread across decades and represents an accumulation of quantities that are individually small. The body continuously produces sperm from puberty onward, making it one of the few biological processes that runs essentially without pause for the better part of a human lifespan. The neurochemistry of sexual activity and the consumption of large amounts of chocolate do share some overlap. Both can trigger the release of phenylethylamine and, to a lesser extent, serotonin in the brain. However, framing them as biochemically identical overstates the case. The mechanisms and magnitudes differ considerably. The comparison is useful as an illustration of how pleasure operates through shared chemical pathways, but the specifics don't map perfectly. The claim that humans and dolphins are the only species that have sex for pleasure is a popular one, but almost certainly too narrow. Bonobos, for instance, use sexual behavior extensively for social purposes beyond reproduction. The challenge is that pleasure is difficult to measure across species. What research does support is that dolphins, like humans, engage in sexual behavior outside of fertile periods, which is relatively unusual among mammals. Estimates of the ratio of explicit to general content on the internet have been cited frequently, though the actual numbers are difficult to verify and shift with the web's growth. The claim that explicit sites outnumber standard ones 5 to 1 predates the modern web scale. What research has consistently found is that adult content represents a disproportionately large share of internet traffic relative to the number of sites, driven by search volume rather than site count. Coitus morpherorum and Venus observa have both been cited as Latin clinical terms used historically to describe specific sexual positions, though their actual usage in classical or medical literature is inconsistent and debated. What is clear is that Latin terminology was frequently applied to human sexuality in early medical writing, giving clinical-sounding names to behaviors that otherwise lacked formal vocabulary in European academic contexts. Research has found that sexual activity can reduce stress, lower cortisol levels, and trigger the release of oxytocin and endorphins, effects that broadly resemble those of anxiolytic medications. Whether it is meaningfully 10 times more effective than diazepam specifically is not a claim supported by controlled clinical study. The underlying biology of sex as a stress reduction mechanism is real. The precise comparative ranking against pharmaceutical options is not. U.S. currency is not printed on paper in the conventional sense. The bills are made from a blend of 75% cotton and 25% linen, which gives them their distinctive texture, durability, and resistance to tearing. This composition also makes them harder to replicate on standard printers. The formula has been used by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing since the 19th century and hasn't changed significantly since. The United States generates more municipal solid waste per capita than almost any other country in the world. Americans produce roughly 4.9 pounds of trash per person per day, which translates to the country being responsible for approximately 12 to 15% of global waste, not 20% by current estimates, but disproportionately high relative to its share of world population. The gap between the US and comparable nations on this measure is substantial. FBI crime statistics consistently show that the majority of violent crimes, including homicides and sexual assaults, are committed by someone known to the victim, a family member, partner, friend, or acquaintance, rather than a stranger. The 98% figure cited here is higher than most studies support, but the directional finding is solid. The stranger danger framework significantly misrepresents where most violent crime actually originates. Early drafts of the Declaration of Independence were written on hemp paper, which was commonly used in the 18th century due to its durability and wide availability. The final signed version, however, was written on parchment, treated animal skin. Hemp and cannabis come from the same plant species, but industrial hemp grown for paper and rope contains negligible amounts of THC, making the connection to marijuana largely botanical rather than practical. Benjamin Franklin was notable not just for his own accomplishments, but for his place in a remarkable family pattern. He was the youngest son of a youngest son for 5 consecutive generations, a lineage detail he mentioned in his autobiography with evident pride. Whether this lineage contributed to any of his traits is unknowable, but Franklin seemed to view it as a meaningful marker of his particular position in a family tree. Triskaidekaphobia, fear of the number 13, is one of the more culturally ingrained numerical superstitions in Western societies. Many buildings skip the 13th floor in their numbering, airlines omit row 13, and some cities lack a 13th street. The origin is debated, but often traced to Norse mythology or the presence of a 13th guest at the Last Supper, depending on which cultural thread you follow. Paraskevedoketriophobia refers specifically to the fear of Friday the 13th, combining the Greek words for Friday, 13, and fear. The date occurs between 1 and 3 times per calendar year, always beginning on a Sunday. Estimates suggest the superstition costs the U.S. economy hundreds of millions of dollars annually in reduced travel and commerce, as people avoid making decisions or commitments on that date. In Italy, the number 17 carries the same cultural weight that 13 does in many English-speaking countries. The association comes from the Roman numeral XVII, which can be rearranged to spell VIXI, a Latin phrase meaning, I have lived, with its implication being that life is now over. Some Italian airlines skip row 17, and hotels occasionally omit it from floor numbering for the same reasons their American counterparts skip 13. In Japan, the number 4 is considered unlucky because one of its pronunciations, shi, is identical to the Japanese word for death. As a result, hospitals, apartment buildings, and hotels frequently skip room or floor numbers containing 4. The avoidance extends to gifts as well. Giving 4 of anything is generally considered inappropriate, particularly in formal or serious contexts. In ancient Rome, courtroom oaths were sometimes sworn by touching the testicles, a practice rooted in the belief that the seat of male generative power was the most sacred thing a man could invoke. Some etymologists have proposed this as a possible origin for the words testify and testimony, though this connection is disputed. The Latin root testis does mean both witness and testicle, which keeps the theory alive. Zip code stands for Zoning Improvement Plan, a system introduced by the United States Postal Service in 1963 to speed up mail sorting and delivery. The 5-digit format divided the country into delivery zones, with each digit narrowing the geographic area from region down to individual post office. The full 9-digit ZIP plus 4 code, introduced in 1983, further refined sorting to specific city blocks or buildings. A standard piece of lumber sold as a 2 by 4 inches actually measures 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches, not 2 inches by 4. The nominal dimensions refer to the rough cut size of the wood before drying and planing, which reduce it to the finished dimensions sold in stores. The naming convention has persisted because it's embedded in construction vocabulary, even though the actual measurements have never matched the label. Happy Meals were introduced by McDonald's in 1979 and have since become a reliable revenue driver, particularly because of the toys included with each order. The claim that they account for 40% of McDonald's profits has circulated widely, but is difficult to verify from publicly available data. What is documented is that McDonald's kids meal category has consistently outperformed expectations and drives significant repeat family visits. The 7-Up logo features a red dot that, according to brand mythology, was inspired by the inventor's red eyes, a result of his albinism. C.L. Grigg created the drink in 1929, originally calling it Bib Label Lithiated Lemon Lime Soda, which explains why the shorter name caught on. The red spot became a consistent design element across decades of branding, though the company has not always emphasized its origin story. The Oxford English Dictionary, the most comprehensive record of the English language ever compiled, took 70 years to finish its first edition. By the time the final volume was printed in 1928, some of the earliest entries were already outdated and had to be revised immediately. The floppy disk icon used as the Save symbol in Microsoft Office has the shutter, the sliding metal piece on the front, depicted on the wrong side. On actual floppy disks, the shutter is positioned differently than the icon shows. The image was a minor inaccuracy that went unnoticed by most users, and was eventually rendered entirely moot by the disappearance of floppy disks from everyday use long before the icon was retired. Both Albert Einstein and Charles Darwin married first cousins. Einstein wed Elsa Lurwenthal in 1919, and Darwin married Emma Wedgwood in 1839. In both cases, the couples were aware of the relationship before marrying. Darwin, somewhat ironically, later studied the effects of inbreeding in plants extensively, producing research that demonstrated the biological advantages of genetic diversity, a finding he applied professionally, but apparently not personally. Camels have 3 eyelids on each eye, 2 conventional lids, and a third transparent membrane called a nictitating membrane that sweeps horizontally across the eye. This inner lid protects against sand and wind without blocking vision entirely, which is essential in desert environments. Camels also have 2 rows of eyelashes as an additional layer of protection, giving their eyes a level of redundancy well suited to some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Edwin Booth, one of the most celebrated stage actors of the 19th century, once pulled a young man to safety after he slipped off a train platform in New Jersey. The young man was Robert Todd Lincoln, the president's son. Edwin was the brother of John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln less than a year later. Robert reportedly acknowledged the rescue in a letter and recognized Edwin by name. Warren Beatty and Shirley MacLaine are siblings, both born in Richmond, Virginia, 3 years apart. MacLaine was born in 1934 and Beatty in 1937, and both pursued acting careers that became defining parts of Hollywood history across different eras. The two have spoken warmly about each other in interviews over the years, though their public personas and film styles couldn't be more different. Daniel Boone, the American frontiersman, whose image became almost inseparable from the coonskin cap, reportedly disliked the hat and rarely wore one. He preferred a wide-brimmed felt hat in practice. The coonskin cap became attached to his image largely through theatrical depictions and later pop culture, including the 1950s television series, which cemented a costume choice the man himself would have rejected. The claim that 55% of U.S. prisoners are incarcerated for drug offenses applies specifically to the federal prison system, where drug convictions are disproportionately represented. Across the broader U.S. prison population, which includes state prisons holding the majority of inmates, the figure is considerably lower, around 15 to 20%. Drug offenses remain the single largest category in federal facilities, driven partly by mandatory minimum sentencing laws. Theodor Seuss Geisel, known universally as Dr. Seuss, maintained that his pen name was meant to rhyme with voice, pronounced Zeus rather than goose. He adopted the Seuss name, partly as a playful nod to his middle name and partly to preserve his actual surname for what he hoped would be a serious literary career. That career never materialized, but the mispronounced pen name became one of the most recognized in publishing history. Slugs have 4 sensory appendages on their heads, which function somewhat like noses. 2 upper tentacles that detect light and general environmental information, and 2 lower tentacles closer to the mouth that handle smell and taste more directly. Calling all 4 noses is a simplification, but the lower pair in particular does perform genuine olfactory work, making the slug's relationship with scent considerably more sophisticated than its appearance suggests. India's constitution and various state-level laws provide significant legal protections for cows, reflecting their sacred status in Hinduism. Cow slaughter is banned outright in most Indian states, and the animals cannot be used as collateral or sold for slaughter. Describing this as a formal Bill of Rights is an informal shorthand. There's no single document with that title, but the legal protections collectively amount to a comprehensive set of codified cow welfare provisions. In 1987, American Airlines discovered it could save a meaningful sum of money by removing a single olive from each salad served in first class. Passengers, it turned out, didn't notice or complain. The total annual saving was approximately $40,000. It became a frequently cited case study in cost management, the kind of detail that illustrates how large-scale operations can generate significant savings from changes that seem almost absurdly small in isolation. Around 200 million M&Ms are sold in the United States every single day. The candy was introduced in 1941 as a practical solution for soldiers. The sugar shell prevented the chocolate from melting in warm conditions. Mars originally produced them in 6 colors: red, yellow, green, brown, orange, and violet. Blue wasn't added until 1995, following a public vote that replaced tan, which had apparently never been anyone's favorite. During World War II, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences suspended its tradition of gold-plated metal Oscar statuettes due to wartime material rationing. From 1942 to 1944, recipients received awards cast in Friday is the most common day for bank robberies in the United States, accounting for roughly half of all incidents across the week. Researchers attribute this partly to higher foot traffic in banks on Fridays, when more people cash checks, and partly to robbers wanting a head start before weekend branch closures slow investigative response. Monday is the second most common day. The name Wendy was essentially invented by J.M. Barrie for his 1904 play, Peter Pan. It derived from a childhood friend's nickname for him, F. Wendy, her version of friendly. Prior to Barrie's use, the name appeared in no recorded birth registries in England or the United States in any meaningful number. The character's popularity caused the name to enter common usage almost immediately after the play opened. Antarctica has the international dialing code +672, though the continent operates several research stations, some of which use different country codes depending on their administering nation. Australian Antarctic bases, for instance, route through Australia's +61 code. The +672 designation is part of the International Telecommunication Union's allocation, but functions differently in practice than a standard national code, given that Antarctica has no permanent civilian population. On the night of August 25, 1940, the first Allied bombs dropped on Berlin during World War II landed on the Berlin Zoo, killing its only elephant. The raid was a retaliatory strike following German bombing of civilian areas in London. The death of the elephant was widely reported at the time, one of those peculiar, specific details that somehow captures the indiscriminate nature of aerial bombardment more vividly than statistics do. One of the first compact discs manufactured in the United States is widely cited as Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, pressed at a CBS Records plant in Terre Haute, Indiana, in 1984, a fortuitously patriotic choice for the country's first major pressing run. IBM adopted Think as its internal motto under Thomas J. Watson Sr. in the early 1900s, using it as a guiding principle for employees, and printing it on signs throughout offices and facilities. The word appeared on everything from notebooks to wall plaques. Decades later, Apple's Think Different campaign, launched in 1997, was widely read as a direct, deliberate play on IBM's motto, positioning Apple as the creative alternative to corporate computing. The word butterfly is often said to have originally been flutterby, later reversed through common usage, but this is almost certainly a folk etymology with no documentary support. The word appears in Old English as butterfleoge, likely derived from an early observation that butterflies were attracted to butter or dairy, or possibly from their butter-yellow coloring. The Flutterby story is a satisfying theory, but the historical record doesn't back it up. Natural blonde hair is genuinely uncommon among adults. Studies suggest only about 2 to 3% of the world's adult population is naturally blonde, with higher concentrations in Northern Europe. The 1 in 14 figure for American women reflects a broader national sample. Blonde hair also tends to darken with age, meaning many people who were blonde as children are no longer counted in the adult figures. RMS Olympic was the Titanic's older sister ship, launched in 1910 and entering service before the Titanic was completed. While the Titanic sank on its maiden voyage in 1912, The Olympic went on to serve for 25 years, surviving a collision, a submarine ramming during World War I, and multiple Atlantic crossings. It was finally retired in 1935 and broken up for scrap, having outlasted its more famous sibling by over 2 decades. If 7% of Americans eat at McDonald's on any given day, that represents roughly 23 million people. McDonald's itself has cited figures around 69 million customers served daily worldwide, with the United States accounting for a significant portion of that total. The chain operates more than 14,000 U.S. locations, making it statistically difficult for most Americans to go more than a few miles without passing one. Vincent van Gogh produced over 900 paintings during his lifetime and sold exactly one. The Red Vineyard, painted in 1888, sold for 400 francs to a Belgian art collector in 1890, just months before his death. Today, his works sell for hundreds of millions of dollars at auction. He died largely unknown, financially dependent on his brother Theo, and almost entirely unaware of the posthumous reputation he was about to acquire. Quicksand is denser than the human body, which means a person cannot fully submerge in it despite what movies suggest. The key is to avoid panicking. Rapid movement increases suction. By leaning back slowly to distribute weight and making gradual, deliberate movements, a person can work themselves free. The process is slow, but the physics consistently favor the person over the sand. Roughly 1 in 10 people on Earth live on an island, accounting for about 740 million people globally. Indonesia alone accounts for more than 270 million of those, spread across thousands of islands. Islands vary from continent-sized landmasses like Australia, if you count it, to tiny atolls with populations of a few hundred. The category is broader and more populous than most people initially picture. About 28% of Africa's land area is classified as wilderness, relatively undisturbed habitat with low human impact. North America has a higher proportion at roughly 38%, largely due to the vast boreal forests and Arctic regions of Canada and Alaska. The figures are frequently cited in conservation discussions to illustrate that meaningful wilderness does still exist, though both continents face continued pressure from development and land conversion. In the 1970s, Charlie Chaplin reportedly entered a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest in San Francisco and placed third. Some versions of the story say he didn't even make the finals. Whether the account is entirely accurate is difficult to verify, but it has been repeated in enough credible context to be widely accepted. The irony of a man failing to convincingly imitate himself has made it one of the more enduring celebrity anecdotes. Elementary, my dear Watson, does not appear anywhere in Arthur Conan Doyle's original Sherlock Holmes stories. The phrase was constructed gradually through stage and film adaptations, with different versions appearing across productions, until it became the defining Holmes quotation, despite Holmes never saying it in that exact form in print. It's a useful reminder that the most quotable version of a line is often not the original one. In the 1942 film, Casablanca, Humphrey Bogart's character Rick never says, "Play it again, Sam." What he actually says is closer to, "You played it for her, you can play it for me." The misquote has been attributed to various sources over the decades and has become so embedded in popular culture that many people are surprised to learn it isn't accurate. Ingrid Bergman's character is actually the one who makes the closest request. The phrase, "Beam me up, Scotty," was never spoken in that exact form during the original run of Star Trek. Various versions appeared, "Beam us up, Scotty. Scotty, beam me up." But the precise, now iconic phrasing did not. William Shatner eventually used it as the title of his 1995 memoir, which is part of what cemented the misquote as the definitive version in public memory. Sharon Stone appeared as one of the original spokesmodels on Star Search, the talent competition that ran from 1983 onward. The show became notable for launching careers, including Stone's, as well as early appearances by Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, and Beyoncé. Stone went on to her breakthrough film role in Basic Instinct in 1992, by which point her Star Search appearance had become a footnote in a considerably larger story. Kenophobia, the fear of open or empty spaces, is considered more prevalent than claustrophobia in some psychological literature, though both are relatively common. Kinophobia can manifest as discomfort in large rooms, empty landscapes, or even blank walls. The fear is thought to be connected to a sense of exposure and vulnerability, rather than confinement, which is the driver behind claustrophobia. The two fears are essentially opposite responses to spatial experience. New York City has approximately a 1 in 4 chance of a white Christmas in any given year, meaning measurable snow on the ground on December 25th. The city's coastal position and relatively mild winter averages make consistent snow cover less likely than inland northeastern cities. Climate records, going back to the late 1800s, have been used to calculate the probability, which holds fairly steady at around 25% despite year-to-year variation. Books most frequently stolen from public libraries include works that are either too embarrassing to check out at the desk or too expensive to purchase. The Guinness World Records has historically topped lists of stolen library books, along with certain medical references and, in some surveys, the Bible. The pattern says something interesting about the intersection of desire, shame, and the honor system that library lending fundamentally relies on. Studies of personal ad users, particularly from the 1990s through the early 2000s, when print and early online personals were prevalent, found that a significant proportion of respondents were already in committed relationships. The 35% figure has been cited in multiple surveys, though methodologies varied. Dating app research in more recent years has found similar patterns, suggesting the behavior predates digital platforms by a considerable margin. The United States spends approximately $200 million annually on barbed wire, which remains a primary fencing material for agricultural land, property boundaries, and security perimeters. Invented in 1874 by Joseph Glidden, barbed wire fundamentally transformed the American West by enabling large-scale land enclosure. The material is cheap, effective, and requires minimal maintenance, qualities that explain why a 150-year-old technology still commands a 9-figure annual market. Every U.S. president has reportedly worn glasses or required vision correction at some point, though many avoided being seen in them publicly. Theodore Roosevelt was notably nearsighted but rarely photographed with glasses. The reluctance to be seen wearing them reflects long-standing concerns about projecting physical weakness, an image consideration that persisted well into the modern era of presidential optics. Jim Henson coined the term Muppet in 1955 as a blend of marionette video.
Coffee doesn't actually dehydrate you. The water content in the brew completely outweighs the mild diuretic effect of the caffeine. Every time someone told you to drink a glass of water after your coffee, they were wrong. Keep drinking. You're doing fine. Carrots improving your eyesight is literally World War II British propaganda. Unless you have a severe vitamin A deficiency, carrots do nothing for your vision. The British military invented that story to hide the fact that they were using radar to spot enemy aircraft. You've been eating carrots for a lie. NASA once funded a woman to live with a dolphin for 10 weeks to teach it English. It ended with the dolphin developing a sexual fixation on the researcher and reportedly dying of heartbreak when the experiment ended. This is a real government-funded scientific program. Just processing that for a second. Here's something that'll make you feel slightly less like yourself. 98% of your atoms are replaced every single year. The cells in your body are constantly being swapped out. You are not the same physical person you were a year ago. So technically, you're just a new person who inherited someone else's memories and thinks they're continuous. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, also messes with your memory. You lose roughly half of what you learn within an hour of learning it. By the end of a day, about 75% of your experiences are effectively gone. The brain is amazing and also running a very aggressive deletion program in the background. For a full decade, every NASA astronaut had to be fluent in Russian to fly on the Soyuz spacecraft. Every control panel label, every emergency procedure, a foreign language, in space, under pressure. If you ever felt bad about struggling with language learning, these people were doing it with their lives on the line. Spanish takes around 600 hours to learn. Japanese takes 2,200. If you've been studying a language and hitting a wall, it is not a personal failure. The difficulty gap between languages is measured in hundreds of hours of extra work. The wall is real. It's just covered in a different alphabet. Before Neil Armstrong ever set foot on the moon, he had survived 7 near-death crashes and ejections across his career as a test pilot. 7. The moon landing wasn't some peak dramatic moment for him. It was arguably a victory lap for a man who the universe had been trying and failing to kill for years. You cannot read in dreams. Your brain's language processing center shuts down during sleep, so words in a dream blur, shift, and refuse to stay still. If text in your dream is perfectly legible and clear, neuroscientists say your brain simply never fully clocked out. Congratulations on your overactive mind. If you're liking these facts so far, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps. Trees in a forest communicate through a massive underground network of fungal threads called mycorrhizae. They use it to share nutrients with weaker, struggling neighbors. They send chemical distress signals when insects attack. The forest floor is essentially a biological internet that trees have been running for millions of years, quietly, without any of us knowing. The satanic leaf-tailed gecko of Madagascar has evolved to look so perfectly like a dead, brown, decaying leaf, complete with holes, fake veins, and ragged edges, that it becomes essentially invisible the moment it stops moving. It didn't just get camouflage, it became a leaf. Evolution spent considerable time on this one specific performance. The Sahara Desert has been slowly expanding southward and has grown by roughly 10% over the past century. It's not staying in place. It's moving, spreading, absorbing new land season by season. The world's largest hot desert is quietly getting larger, and most people are completely unaware it's happening. Your fingerprints begin forming in the womb at around 10 weeks of gestation, and they are so unique that not even identical twins, people with the exact same DNA, share the same prints. The specific pattern is shaped by random environmental factors in the womb, making your fingerprints genuinely one of a kind in the entire history of life on Earth. Giraffes have exactly the same number of vertebrae in their necks as humans, 7. The difference is that each giraffe vertebra has elongated to about 10 inches long, compared to roughly 1 inch in a human. Same number of bones, just a very different scale. Nature found one solution and then ran with it in 2 completely different directions. Human stomach acid sits at a pH between 1.5 and 3.5, roughly as corrosive as battery acid. It's strong enough to slowly dissolve zinc metal. Your stomach lining has to replace itself every few days just to survive the environment it's operating in. You are quietly, constantly dissolving yourself from the inside, and your body is barely keeping up. In most lion prides, female lions carry out around 90% of all the hunting. The male's primary roles are territory patrol, fighting rival males, and protecting cubs. The lions lying around doing nothing while the females handle business aren't being lazy. That's the system. It's just that the system has been sold to us as the opposite for a very long time. A doctor spent 60 years deliberately cracking the knuckles on only one hand to prove it doesn't cause arthritis. 60 years. He left the other hand alone as a control. At the end, both hands were completely identical. Science won. The argument is over. You're welcome. Knuckle crackers everywhere. A strawberry is not technically a berry under botanical classification, but watermelons, cucumbers, and eggplants all qualify as true botanical berries. The definition has nothing to do with size, taste, or what we call them in the grocery store. Botany decided the rules a long time ago and has been quietly judging our kitchen vocabulary ever since. The water boatman insect is 2 millimeters long. It is also the loudest animal on Earth relative to its body size, producing sounds up to 99.2 decibels by rubbing a specialized organ against its abdomen. That's louder than a passing freight train. A bug the size of a sesame seed is generating freight train noise, and nobody talks about this. Pause for a second. Did you like the video yet? No. Go ahead, I'll wait. A single lightning bolt contains enough electrical energy to toast approximately 100,000 slices of bread. The problem is it dumps all of that energy in under a millisecond, far too fast for any device to practically capture it. Nature is generating staggering amounts of power every thunderstorm, and we still can't use it. Just another reminder that humans are not as clever as we think. A group of cats is called a clouder, a group of kittens is called a kindle, and a group of wildcats is officially called a destruction. Destruction. Someone in the naming committee knew exactly what wild cats were like and refused to sugarcoat it. The most honest collective noun in the animal kingdom. Pill bugs, the little roly-poly things you find under rocks, are not insects or arachnids. They are crustaceans. They are more closely related to crabs, lobsters, and shrimp than to any land-based bug. There are many crustaceans living in your garden. The ocean never really left. It just sent scouts. Vampire bats are the only mammals that will share food with their friends. If a bat goes a night without finding blood and is close to starving, a well-fed roost mate will fly over and regurgitate blood directly into its mouth. And bats remember who helped them. They keep track of who their allies are over years. Vampire bats have a more functional social safety net than most countries. Your body contains approximately 7 octillion atoms. That's a 7 followed by 27 zeros. Most of them were forged inside ancient stars before our solar system even existed. You are not just made of stardust in a poetic sense. You are literally assembled from the remnants of stars that lived and died billions of years before Earth was formed. That's not metaphor, that's chemistry. Adult cats essentially invented the meow specifically to communicate with humans. Wild cats and feral adult cats almost never meow at each other. They developed the sound almost exclusively as a manipulation tool for dealing with the humans they live with. Your cat is not speaking its natural language when it meows at you. It engineered a sound specifically to get what it wants from you. And it's been working. Turkey's barehead skin actually changes color based on their emotions. Vivid red when excited or agitated. Pale white when alarmed. Deep blue when calm. They have an involuntary emotional color display visible from a distance, like a mood ring built directly into their face. Turkeys cannot hide how they're feeling, and that's honestly kind of charming. The original Kit Kat bar was created in 1935, specifically designed to be thin and light enough to fit in a factory worker's lunchbox and survive a commute without crumbling. It wasn't designed to be a luxury treat. It was designed for people carrying their lunch to work. One of the world's most loved snacks started as a practical working-class engineering problem. Hippos don't actually swim. They're too dense to float. Instead, they walk or bounce along riverbeds on their tiptoes, holding their breath, and they surface automatically through muscle memory roughly every 3 to 5 minutes. The animal you've been picturing splashing around in water this whole time has been walking along the bottom, like a very large, very aggressive pedestrian. A group of ravens is officially called an unkindness or a conspiracy. Both names feel genuinely appropriate. Ravens have been documented planning deception, holding long-term grudges, and outperforming great apes on certain cognitive tests. Whoever named groups of ravens clearly spent time near them and came away concerned. Vatican City technically has the highest crime rate per capita of any country on Earth, mostly because millions of tourists are pickpocketed or scammed every year inside a country with a permanent resident population of only around 800 people. The math just doesn't work in Vatican City's favor. The most sacred city in Christendom is statistically the most crime-ridden nation on the planet. A supermoon looks about 14% larger and 30% brighter than a regular full moon because it occurs when the moon reaches its full phase at the closest point of its elliptical orbit around Earth. It's not an illusion. The moon is physically closer. You are seeing it from a shorter distance. The sky is doing something real, and most people scroll past it. Sheep can recognize and remember up to 50 individual sheep faces for more than 2 years. Long-term facial recognition comparable in certain ways to human memory, in an animal that has spent centuries being called dim. Sheep have been misjudged. They know your face. They know each other's faces. They are watching you more carefully than you're watching them. Stick around, because the next run of facts only gets stranger. New Zealand has more species of penguin found in and around its waters than any other country on Earth. About 13 of the world's roughly 18 penguin species either live in, breed in, or regularly visit New Zealand's coastlines. Most people picture penguins in Antarctica. New Zealand is quietly the penguin capital of the planet. The seahorse is officially the slowest fish in the ocean. The dwarf seahorse tops out at roughly 1.5 meters per hour. It navigates by gripping seaweed with its tail and riding currents rather than swimming against them. The slowest fish in the ocean figured out that the trick isn't to fight the water, it's to let the water carry you. That's either laziness or wisdom, and honestly, it might be both. If you unfolded and spread out all the tissue inside a pair of human lungs completely flat, it would cover roughly half a tennis court, about 75 square meters of breathing surface. All of that is compressed inside your chest. The engineering packed into your rib cage is genuinely extraordinary, and we never think about it until something goes wrong. Voyager 1 has traveled so far from Earth that the radio signals it sends back, traveling at the speed of light, take over 22 hours to reach us. Everything we're hearing from that spacecraft is almost a full day old by the time it arrives. We launched something in 1977 and it is so far away that even light needs nearly a full day to cover the distance. That number should break your sense of scale. Male birds of paradise in New Guinea have evolved feathers so optically black they absorb 99.95% of all light, darker than almost any human-made material ever created. The result is that the bright colors on their bodies appear to float against a void. They didn't just evolve bright colors. They evolved a backdrop so dark that the colors seem to glow against nothing. Nature invented dramatic lighting. The first solid chocolate bar you could actually eat wasn't invented until 1847, when Joseph Fry in England figured out how to combine cocoa powder, sugar, and cocoa butter into something moldable. Before that, chocolate was only ever consumed as a drink. Every chocolate bar in history is less than 200 years old. Something that feels ancient and essential has been around for less time than photography. Polar bears are officially classified as marine mammals, the same category as whales, dolphins, and seals. They spend so much of their lives on sea ice and depend almost entirely on the ocean for their food that scientists decided they belong in the ocean category. The big white fluffy bear that lives on land is, taxonomically, a sea creature. Your nose can warm incoming air from near freezing temperatures to close to body temperature in under 1 second. It uses a network of blood vessel-lined turbinate bones that act as a rapid heat exchanger before air reaches your lungs. You are walking around with a biological heating system in the center of your face, and most people think the nose is just for smelling things. Elephants are one of only a handful of animals that can recognize themselves in a mirror, a test of self-awareness that the vast majority of animals fail. And they've been observed using mirrors to inspect parts of their own bodies they normally can't see. An elephant looks in a mirror, understands what it's seeing, and then thinks, let me look at my own ear. That's self-awareness in action. Wolverines, pound for pound, are one of the most ferocious animals alive. They have been reliably documented driving grizzly bears and mountain lions off freshly killed prey, animals that outweigh them many times over. A wolverine is roughly the size of a medium dog. It does not care. It has decided that your kill is now its kill, and the grizzly bear has chosen not to argue about it. The inside of your cheek is lined with cells almost identical to the cells lining your esophagus. And those same cells, under certain lab conditions, can spontaneously develop into functional skin cells, complete with hair follicles. The inside of your mouth contains cells that have the potential to grow hair. The human body is constantly one experimental condition away from doing something completely unhinged. Mushrooms are more closely related to animals than they are to plants. They share a common ancestor with the animal kingdom. They inhale oxygen, exhale kuno, and are made of chitin, the same structural material as insect exoskeletons. The thing on your pizza is biologically closer to you than it is to the lettuce next to it. Reorganize your sense of what's in your food. The sun's light takes about 8 minutes to reach Earth. That part most people know. But here's what most people don't know. The energy inside that light took between 10,000 and 170,000 years just to travel from the sun's core to its surface before it could even escape into space. The sunlight on your face left the solar core before modern humans existed. It just took that long to get out. Crows have been filmed repeatedly sliding down snowy rooftops, flying back to the top, and doing it again, over and over, with no food or survival benefit whatsoever. Just lighting. For fun. This is one of the most compelling documented pieces of evidence that animals other than humans engage in play purely for the joy of it. Most astronauts grow 2 to 5 centimeters taller within days of reaching space because the spine decompresses without gravity's constant compression. But it also causes back pain, and they shrink back to normal height within hours of returning to Earth. Space temporarily makes you taller, and then Earth immediately takes it back. The universe giveth, and the universe taketh away. Lobsters taste with their legs. Tiny hair like chemoreceptors covering their walking limbs let them taste and smell simultaneously as they walk. A lobster stepping onto food instantly knows exactly what it's standing on. They are tasting the world with every step they take. Imagine walking into a room and immediately knowing what every surface tastes like. That is the lobster experience. There are rivers flowing underneath the ocean floor. Cold, dense, super salty brine seeps out of the seafloor in channels that flow downhill exactly like surface rivers, complete with banks, waves, and waterfalls, but existing entirely underwater, beneath the ocean. There are rivers at the bottom of the ocean, and they are made of water that is even denser than the ocean surrounding them. The planet has layers of weird we haven't finished exploring. The ocean glows in the dark in patches large enough to be visible from space. Massive blooms of bioluminescent bacteria, called Noctiluca, can cover areas the size of a small country and glow steadily for weeks. Not the quick flash response of other bioluminescent organisms, a sustained, weeks-long glow. There are sections of Earth's ocean that look lit from below, visible from orbit, and most people on land have no idea. The human eye can detect a single photon of light in total darkness. One photon, the smallest measurable unit of light that physically exists. Your vision, under ideal conditions, is literally operating at the physical limit of what is even possible. There is no more sensitive light detector that physics allows. Certain species of Pacific salmon can detect Earth's magnetic field and use it as a compass to navigate back to the exact stream where they were born, sometimes traveling thousands of miles through featureless open ocean to find a specific few meters of riverbed. They leave as juveniles. They return as adults. The GPS coordinates were in them the whole time. The blobfish has a unique protein in its DNA that keeps its cell chemistry stable under the crushing pressure of the deep ocean floor, a biological trick so effective that materials researchers are actively studying it for engineering applications. Are you subscribed yet? Go ahead and hit subscribe. I'll still be here. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than to the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The pyramids were built around 2560 BCE. Cleopatra lived around 30 BCE. The moon landing was 1969. The pyramids are BCE 3,069. Ancient Egypt's most famous queen lived closer to our time than to the monuments her civilization is defined by. The average person walks roughly 100,000 miles over a lifetime, approximately equivalent to walking around the entire circumference of the Earth 4 times. You're slowly, gradually, one step at a time, walking an equivalent distance to circling the planet 4 times. You are already most of the way around the first lap. The Saharan silver ant can sprint at 855 millimeters per second, the fastest speed relative to body length of any ant ever measured. And it navigates home across a completely featureless desert using a built-in step counter that tracks exactly how many strides it's taken. It counts its own footsteps to find its way home across the Sahara. That's not instinct. That's mathematics. A day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. It takes 243 Earth days to rotate once on its axis, but only 225 Earth days to complete a full orbit around the Sun. Venus finishes one trip around the Sun before it finishes one spin. It is possible to watch a Venusian year go by while still waiting for sunrise. Venus operates on its own completely irrational schedule and does not apologize for it. Elephant trunks contain over 40,000 individual muscles. The entire human body has only about 600. That trunk is one of the most precise and powerful multifunctional limbs ever evolved by any animal. It can uproot trees and then pick up a single grape without crushing it. 40,000 muscles dedicated to one appendage. Elephants are operating at a different engineering level. Hot dog buns were invented on the spot at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. A vendor ran out of the white gloves he was handing out with sausages, and a neighboring baker sliced rolls as a replacement. One of the most iconic foods in American culture was improvised in a moment of glove shortage. Necessity invents things. Worcestershire sauce contains fermented anchovies as a core ingredient. That's where the deep, savory flavor comes from. Many people who insist they dislike fish consume it regularly without realizing it. You may have spent years eating fish sauce and calling it your favorite condiment. The label was right there. If you're still watching, drop a comment right now. Just say real one. Let me know you're one of the real ones. The paradoxical frog of South America does something no other vertebrate on Earth does. It shrinks dramatically as it grows up. Tadpoles can reach up to 25 centimeters long. The fully grown adult frog measures only about 7 centimeters. The baby is 4 times the size of the adult. Scientists named it the paradoxical frog because they couldn't think of a more accurate word. Sometimes that's just the right call. The Hubble Space Telescope launched in 1990 with a catastrophically flawed mirror. The first images came back blurry and NASA was devastated. They then dispatched astronauts in 1993 to install corrective optics, essentially acting as contact lenses for the telescope. It worked. One of the most important scientific instruments in human history needed glasses, and humans went into space to give them to it. Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador, not Mount Everest, is the point on Earth's surface physically closest to outer space. Because Earth bulges at the equator, Chimborazo's peak sits about 6,384 kilometers from Earth's center compared to Everest's 6,382. Everest is taller above sea level, but Chimborazo is closer to the stars. The mountain that wins depends entirely on how you define winning. Some species of octopus collect discarded coconut shell halves from the ocean floor, carry them tucked under their bodies while walking awkwardly on 2 arms, and then later reassemble the shells into portable shelters. They are carrying building materials to use later. They have plans. That's not instinct. That's forward planning from an animal with no skeleton and a distributed brain. Octopuses continue to have no right being this intelligent. The eye of Madagascar locates wood-boring grubs by tapping rapidly on tree branches with its elongated skeletal middle finger and listening for the hollow resonance of tunnels inside. Then it uses that same finger to hook the grubs out, acting as a built-in stethoscope and extraction tool simultaneously. One finger that is both a medical scanner and a surgical instrument. The eye built its own toolkit into its own hand. A comet's tail always points directly away from the sun, regardless of which direction the comet is actually traveling. Solar wind and radiation pressure push the tail outward, so a comet heading toward the sun has its glowing tail streaming out in front of it. The tail isn't trailing behind like a scarf in the wind. It's being pushed. Everything about comets turns out to be backwards from how you picture them. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, is believed to hold more liquid water beneath its frozen surface than all of Earth's oceans combined. And it's one of the most seriously considered candidates for extraterrestrial life in the entire solar system. The best bet for life beyond Earth isn't on a distant exoplanet. It's a moon in our own backyard, buried under ice, quietly waiting. The banded sea crate hunts entirely underwater, but must return to land to digest its food. It physically cannot process meals in the ocean. It hauls itself onto shore specifically to complete digestion, and then returns to hunt again, a sea snake that lives in the ocean, but can only eat on land. The sun and moon appear almost exactly the same size in Earth's sky purely by coincidence. The sun is about 400 times wider than the moon, but also about 400 times farther away. That precise cosmic accident is the only reason total solar eclipses are possible. If either number were slightly different, we'd never see a perfect eclipse. The universe stumbled into one of its most spectacular shows entirely by accident. The Irukandji jellyfish is barely the size of a human thumbnail. Its sting produces what has been described as the worst pain in medical literature: crushing chest pain, extreme nausea, and a documented sense of impending doom, so intense that victims have begged medical staff to be killed. A creature the size of your thumbnail. With that sting, the ocean does not scale threat level to size. White truffles sell for over $3,000 per pound and cannot be cultivated under any circumstances. They only grow wild near the roots of specific trees in precise soil conditions, and every single attempt to farm them has failed. The entire global supply must be sniffed out by trained dogs and harvested by hand. One of the most expensive foods on Earth is completely beyond human control to produce. Humpback whales have been documented dozens of times rushing to interfere when orcas attack other animals, including seals, gray whales, and even sunfish, with no apparent benefit to themselves. Scientists have documented this as something functionally resembling altruism. Humpback whales are out here risking themselves to protect species they've never met from predators they have no reason to antagonize. There is an argument that humpback whales are morally better than most humans. The Amazon River has no bridges spanning its entire 6,400-kilometer length. Not one. The combination of extreme width during flood season, dense impenetrable rainforest terrain, and the staggering cost of construction has meant that the world's largest river by volume has never been crossed by a bridge. You want to get to the other side? You take a boat. Same as it's always been. Firefly bioluminescence converts almost all chemical energy directly into light with essentially zero heat waste, nearly 100% efficiency. A standard incandescent light bulb, by comparison, wastes about 90% of its energy as heat. A tiny insect lighting up in your backyard is operating at nearly perfect energy efficiency. Engineers have spent decades trying to match what a firefly does by accident every summer night. Hit that like button. Seriously, we've got more facts to get through. The Great Blue Hole off Belize is a perfectly circular underwater sinkhole 300 meters wide and 125 meters deep. It formed during the last ice age when sea levels were much lower and an ancient cave ceiling collapsed as the oceans rose. A geological cave from the Ice Age now sits completely submerged in the Caribbean and looks like a perfect blue circle from the air. The Earth leaves its old architecture everywhere. The vampire squid is neither a squid nor an octopus. It belongs to its own entirely separate ancient order called Vampiromorphidae, and it is the only living member of that group. A genuine living fossil that has remained essentially unchanged since the Jurassic period. There's a creature in the deep ocean that is the sole surviving member of its entire branch of evolution, living in the same form it had when dinosaurs were alive. It is the last of its kind, and it is still down there. When a honeybee stings a human, the barbed stinger gets caught in elastic skin and rips out of the bee's abdomen, killing it. But this only happens with mammalian skin. Bees can sting other insects repeatedly without dying. Human skin specifically is what triggers this fatal sacrifice. Your skin uniquely kills bees that sting you. That is a feature of your biology. You didn't ask for it, but there it is. The International Space Station must fire its engines several times per year just to stay in orbit. Even at 400 kilometers altitude, there are enough stray atmospheric molecules to gradually drag the ISS downward. Without regular reboosts, it would naturally deorbit and burn up within a few years. The most expensive structure humans have ever built requires constant active effort just to stay where it is. A very relatable situation. Saturn's North Pole has a permanent hexagonal storm wider than 2 Earths combined, and it has been rotating continuously for at least 40 years without stopping. A hexagon, a perfect 6-sided geometric shape formed by storm winds, sustained for decades. Saturn looked at the concept of a storm and decided to make it mathematical. Nobody asked it to. The human cornea is the only tissue in the body with 0 blood vessels. It gets its oxygen directly from the air around it. This is why contact lenses can be dangerous if worn too long. They block oxygen from reaching a tissue that has no backup delivery system. Your eyes are breathing. They are doing it silently, constantly, and they would appreciate it if you took your contacts out at night. In Longyearbyen, Norway, the northernmost city on Earth, it is effectively illegal to die. Bodies don't decompose in the permafrost. So anyone who appears to be near death is flown to the mainland before they can be buried locally. The town has a no-death policy not for philosophical reasons, but for practical geological ones. You must be alive or leave. Longyearbyen enforces this. On Mars, sunsets are blue instead of red. Fine dust in the Martian atmosphere scatters red wavelengths away, while letting blue light through, the exact opposite of what Earth's atmosphere does. Everything about Martian skies is an inversion of ours. The planet next door is running the same physics in reverse and producing a completely different sky as a result. Avocados nearly went extinct thousands of years ago. Their natural seed dispersers were giant ground sloths, massive animals that could eat the large fruit whole and deposit the seeds elsewhere. When those animals died out, the avocado had no way to spread on its own. Humans essentially rescued the avocado from extinction by farming it. Your brunch exists because ancient humans stepped in when the giant sloths left. Your body produces roughly 1 liter of mucus every single day. Most of it slides silently down the back of your throat and into your stomach without you ever noticing. You're not a person who occasionally has mucus. You are a mucus-producing organism every hour of every day. The machinery runs constantly. You're just usually unaware of it. Now you are. The original Coca-Cola recipe contained approximately 9 milligrams of cocaine per glass, derived from fresh coca leaves. It was quietly removed from the formula in 1903. So for the first 17 years of Coca-Cola's existence, it contained actual cocaine. It was also marketed as a health tonic, a cocaine health drink in a glass bottle. The 1880s were a wild time for beverage regulation. Goosebumps are a completely useless evolutionary relic in modern humans. In our fur-covered ancestors, they made hair stand up to trap warmth, or make the body appear larger to predators. We lost the fur and kept the reflex. Your body is still running software designed for a version of you that no longer exists, triggering a response that now accomplishes absolutely nothing. A ghost feature still in the code. Champagne bubbles were originally considered a catastrophic winemaking defect. Medieval French winemakers called it devil's wine and spent decades actively trying to stop the carbonation from forming. The thing that now makes champagne worth hundreds of dollars per bottle was, for a long time, treated as evidence that a batch had gone wrong. The wine industry accidentally invented its most profitable product. Your kidneys filter your entire blood supply roughly 40 times every single day. processing about 180 liters of fluid to produce just 1 to 2 liters of urine. You have 2 organs quietly running a continuous industrial filtration operation inside your body, processing enough liquid to fill a bathtub every 24 hours without any conscious effort on your part. The kidneys are underappreciated. There's an exoplanet called HD 189733b that has winds of 7,000 kilometers per hour and rains molten glass sideways. Silicate particles in its atmosphere condense and fall as glass droplets in a permanent horizontal storm. A planet where it rains glass sideways in 7,000 kilometers/h winds. The universe builds environments that make Earth's worst weather look like a light drizzle. Raw cashews straight from the shell are actually toxic. They contain urushiol, the same compound found in poison ivy, which is why commercially sold raw, cashews have always been steamed first. There is no such thing as a truly raw cashew in any store. Every cashew you've ever eaten has already been heat treated. The nut industry has been quietly protecting you from poison ivy this entire time. Bolivia has 2 capital cities. Sucre is the constitutional capital and seat of the judiciary. La Paz is the seat of government and the legislative capital. Both are technically the capital depending on what question you're asking. Bolivia looked at the concept of having 1 capital and decided that was too simple. 2 capitals. Problem solved. Sort of. The enteric nervous system, the network of neurons running your gut, contains over 100 million nerve cells and can function entirely independently of your brain. It manages digestion, regulates gut bacteria, and produces 95% of your body's serotonin. Your gut is not just processing food. It's running its own nervous system, making its own neurotransmitters, and barely consulting your brain about any of it. You have a second brain. It lives in your stomach. Finland has approximately 188,000 lakes, more lakes per capita than any other country on Earth, covering roughly 10% of the country's total land area. 1 in 10 square meters of Finland is a lake. They didn't make a big deal about it. They just built the country around the water and got on with things. Finland is functionally part lake. Carrots were originally purple and yellow. Dutch farmers in the 17th century selectively bred the orange variety, reportedly to honor the Dutch royal house of Orange. Orange carrots then gradually became the global standard. The vegetable that everyone pictures as orange was, for most of carrot history, purple. A royal family's favorite color changed what carrots look like for the entire world. Bones are stronger than concrete by weight and can withstand roughly 17,000 pounds per square inch of pressure before fracturing. Your femur alone can absorb the equivalent weight of a loaded truck. The skeleton you're walking around on is, pound for pound, stronger than the material used to build bridges. You are structurally more impressive than you give yourself credit for. Peanut butter was originally invented as a health food specifically for elderly patients who had lost their teeth and could no longer chew protein. It was first patented in 1884 as a soft nutritional paste for people who couldn't eat solid food. One of the world's favorite comfort foods started as a medical necessity for edentulous elderly patients. Food history is rarely glamorous. Frigate birds can sleep while flying by shutting down one brain hemisphere at a time, catching micro-naps on one side while the other stays alert, allowing them to stay airborne over the ocean for months without landing. They solve the need for sleep by sleeping in halves. Your brain cannot do this, which is why you crash on the couch. Evolution gave frigate birds the better deal. When you blush, your stomach lining also turns red. It's the same involuntary blood vessel response, just hidden where you can't see it. The thing your face does when you're embarrassed is happening simultaneously to your stomach. Your entire digestive system is blushing with you every time. The Dead Sea is shrinking by roughly 1 meter per year. It has already lost about a third of its total surface area since the 1960s, and sinkholes are appearing around its shores as the water retreats. The most famous lake in the ancient world is quietly disappearing in real time. Within a century, the Dead Sea as it currently exists may be largely gone. The name may end up being prophetic in a completely different way. Army ants can collectively form living bridges by linking their own bodies together, using themselves as the structure, allowing the entire colony to cross gaps that no single ant could manage. They become the bridge. They do not build a bridge. They are the bridge. And then, when the colony is crossed, they dismantle themselves and move on. Army ants are the most cooperative structure in the animal kingdom, and they do it with their bodies. If you could drive to the sun at a steady 100 kilometers per hour without stopping, the trip would take approximately 171 years. Not a long weekend. Not a road trip. 171 years of continuous driving. The sun looks close in the sky because we have no intuitive scale for astronomical distances. It is not close. It is 171 years away at highway speed. The shoebill stork can stand completely motionless for so many consecutive hours, waiting to ambush prey that tourists have reported mistaking it for a decorative statue or a prop. It has been documented standing still so long that people walked up and touched it, assuming it was fake. A living bird, sitting still, so convincingly motionless that humans thought it was artificial. Patience as a hunting strategy, executed at an elite level. More people live in the Tokyo metropolitan area than in the entire country of Canada. Roughly 37 million people in one city versus about 38 million spread across the second largest country on Earth. Canada has more land than any country except Russia. Tokyo has almost as many people in one metro area. These two places are operating at completely different densities, and it almost doesn't seem real. The Hercules Corona Borealis. Great Wall is the largest known structure in the universe, a network of galaxy clusters stretching approximately 10 billion light-years across. It is so large it challenges the models cosmologists use to explain how the cosmos formed. Nothing that big should exist according to our current understanding of how the universe distributes matter. The universe didn't get the memo. If you're enjoying this video, make sure you're subscribed. The first commercial breakfast cereal, granola, launched in 1863, was so rock hard, it had to be soaked in milk overnight before it was safe to eat. Customers called it eating cannonballs. The entire concept of breakfast cereal, the thing now associated with easy mornings and cartoon mascots, started as a product so hard it required overnight preparation and was compared to artillery. The industry had some product iterations to get through. Naked mole rats are virtually immune to cancer. They feel almost no pain from acid or capsaicin, and they can live up to 37 years, nearly 10 times longer than other rodents of the same size. One small, wrinkled, nearly blind underground rodent is carrying the biological secrets to longevity, pain resistance, and cancer immunity. Scientists are studying them intensely. The naked mole rat may be the most medically important animal alive. All of the gold in Earth's crust was deposited by meteorite bombardment after the planet formed. The original gold that existed when Earth was molten sank straight to the iron core, where it remains completely unreachable. Every piece of gold in every ring, vault, and circuit board on Earth arrived from space. Gold is not native to Earth's surface. It was delivered. The planet we live on received a shipment of gold from the cosmos, and we've been fighting over it ever since. The banana-flavored, candy, medicine, and artificial flavoring you've been tasting your entire life is not based on the bananas currently in stores. It replicates the Gros Michel variety, a completely different banana that went functionally extinct in the 1950s due to a fungal plague. Banana flavor tastes wrong to you because it's accurate to a banana that no longer exists. You've been tasting a ghost fruit this whole time. A snail's mouth is smaller than the head of a pin. Yet inside it holds a tongue-like structure called a radula that can contain up to 14,175 individual teeth arranged in rows. 14,175 teeth. Inside a mouth smaller than a pinhead. The snail did not need this many teeth and got them anyway. Nature gave the snail an aggressive dental budget, and the snail accepted. New Zealand was the last major landmass on Earth to be settled by humans. Polynesian explorers arrived only around 1250 to 1300 CE, less than 800 years ago. While civilizations were building cathedrals in Europe and empires in Asia, New Zealand was still uninhabited. One of the most beautiful places on the planet was essentially untouched until 700 years ago. The Boomerang Nebula is a dying star 5,000 light-years away, and it is the coldest known place in the universe, just 1 Kelvin. Colder than the average background temperature of deep outer space itself. A dying star managed to produce something colder than the void of space. The universe contains a place that is colder than nothing, created by something burning out. That is one of the most poetic facts in astronomy. Authentic wasabi loses its pungency completely within about 15 minutes of being grated. The key chemical compound breaks down that fast. Any wasabi that tastes the same after sitting at a sushi restaurant table for 20 minutes has almost certainly never been real wasabi. Most people outside Japan have never tasted the actual thing. You've been eating green horseradish paste and calling it wasabi. About 12% of women have a genetic mutation giving them 4 types of cone cells instead of the standard 3, a condition called tetrachromacy. It may allow them to perceive up to 100 million colors that the rest of humanity cannot distinguish. A significant portion of the female population might be seeing colors that the rest of us have no access to, no words for, and no way to imagine. Their visual reality is literally different from ours. The mantis shrimp has 12 to 16 types of photoreceptors compared to our 3, yet research shows they don't actually see more colors than humans. Instead, they process color like a rapid-fire barcode scanner rather than blending shades the way we do. They're not seeing more. They're processing differently. The mantis shrimp has a completely alien visual system, and it doesn't even use it the way you'd expect. San Marino claims to be the world's oldest surviving republic, founded in 301 CE, older than the Roman Catholic Church, maintaining continuous self-government ever since from a single hilltop in northern Italy. It has survived every empire, war, and political upheaval of the past 1,700 years. A tiny hilltop microstate has been continuously self-governing since before the fall of Rome. San Marino simply refused to stop existing. Properly sealed canned food doesn't actually expire through spoilage. The contents remain safe essentially indefinitely as long as the seal is intact. What degrades over time is texture and taste, not safety. Canned food from decades ago has been eaten and found to be safe. The expiration date on a can is about quality, not danger. Your apocalypse supplies are probably still fine. The tiny hair-like sensory cells inside your inner ear, called stereocilia, are the only sensory cells in the human body that cannot regenerate once destroyed. Hearing damage from loud noise is permanent, unlike most other types of cellular injury. Every concert, every explosion, every time you turned it up too loud, that's permanent. The cells that made it possible for you to hear that sound are gone. They are not coming back. New Caledonian crows don't just use tools, they design them. They select and shape leaves or twigs into hooks to extract grubs from holes, crafting tools for a specific intended purpose. They are the only non-primate animals ever observed doing this. Crows are out here engineering custom instruments from raw materials, and they do it consistently, reliably, and with intention. The Caesar salad was not invented in Rome or by anyone Italian. It was created in Tijuana, Mexico in 1924 by an Italian-American restaurateur named Cesar Cardini, who reportedly threw it together on the 4th of July from whatever was left in the kitchen at the end of a busy night. A salad named after a Roman emperor was improvised at a Mexican restaurant on American Independence Day by an Italian immigrant. Food history is always stranger than you expect. The palmaris longus is a forearm muscle that serves absolutely no function in modern humans. About 14% of people are born without it on at least one arm. and surgeons routinely harvest it for tendon repair in others with zero functional loss from the removal. Your body may be carrying a muscle that does nothing, that surgeons can take for spare parts, and you'd never notice either way. The Virginia opossum is completely immune to rattlesnake venom. It produces a protein in its blood that neutralizes the toxin on contact. Researchers are actively studying this protein as the foundation for a universal antivenom. A marsupial that plays dead as a defense strategy is also secretly carrying the biological key to treating one of the world's most dangerous venoms. The opossum contains multitudes. The Faroe Islands have roughly 80,000 sheep and only about 50,000 people, making it the only territory on Earth where sheep formally outnumber humans. The sheep won. Demographically, the Faroe Islands belong to the sheep. The people are living in a sheep-majority nation, and they seem fine with it. The Maillard reaction, the browning process that creates crust on bread, sear on meat, and depth in coffee, produces over 1,000 distinct flavor and aroma compounds in fractions of a second. The reason cooked food tastes better than raw food in almost every case is a single chemical reaction generating over 1,000 flavors at once. Every time something browns in a pan, the universe is performing a 1,000-part chemical symphony in your kitchen. Your body temperature follows a strict 24-hour cycle regardless of your sleep schedule. It reaches its lowest point around 4 to 6 a.m. and its highest around 4 to 6 p.m., a pattern that persists through jet lag, night shifts, and irregular sleeping. Your temperature is running its own internal clock, and it does not care what time zone you're in or when you went to bed. The body has its own agenda. Everyone knows roughly 1 million Earths could fit inside the sun. But the largest known star, Stephenson 218, is so enormous it could theoretically contain around 10 billion suns. 10 billion suns inside one star. The sun, which seems incomprehensibly large from Earth, is a rounding error compared to what else is out there. The tomato was considered poisonous in Europe for nearly 200 years after arriving from the Americas. Wealthy Europeans who ate from pewter plates were likely being poisoned during that time. But by the lead the tomato's acid leached from the plate, not the tomato itself. They blamed the tomato. The real killer was the dinnerware. Lead plates murdered people for 2 centuries, and the tomato took the blame. The human heart starts beating just 5 weeks after conception, before the brain has even finished forming. And over an average lifetime, it will complete more than 3 billion beats without ever once stopping to rest. 3 billion. No holidays. No maintenance windows. Just continuous operation from 5 weeks after conception until the last moment. The most reliable machine in the known universe is the one running in your chest. The hammerhead shark's uniquely wide head evolved, specifically as a biological electromagnetic detector. The spread allows it to scan a much larger area of seafloor for the faint electrical fields given off by stingrays buried under sand. It didn't evolve a wide head for hydrodynamics or vision. It evolved a wide head to build a larger antenna. The hammerhead is a living electromagnetic sensor array. Mount Roraima on the border of Venezuela, Guyana, and Brazil is a completely flat-topped sandstone plateau rising over 2,000 meters above the jungle floor. Its isolated summit harbors unique species found absolutely nowhere else on Earth. Arthur Conan Doyle used it as inspiration for The Lost World. He wasn't entirely wrong. The top of Roraima is biologically isolated enough to have evolved its own ecosystem. There are species up there that exist nowhere else. When you look at the Andromeda Galaxy with your naked eye on a clear night, the light reaching you left that galaxy 2.5 million years ago. Before modern humans existed, before our species had fully evolved. The most distant thing you can see with the naked eye is showing you a 2.5 million-year-old image. You are doing time travel with your own eyes every time you look up. Mercury has virtually no atmosphere. Daytime temperatures reach 430 degrees Celsius, while nighttime temperatures plunge to minus 180 degrees. A temperature swing of 610 degrees on the same rock, same planet, just different sides. The most extreme day-night temperature difference of any planet in the solar system. Black pepper was so valuable in medieval Europe, it was literally used as currency. You could pay rent, dowries, and taxes in peppercorns. When the Visigoths sacked Rome in 408 CE, they demanded 3,000 pounds of pepper as part of the ransom. The most common spice on every restaurant table in the world was once so precious that armies demanded it instead of gold. The pepper shaker next to you used to be a financial instrument. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, and each neuron can form up to 10,000 connections. The total number of possible neural configurations in a single human brain exceeds the number of atoms. The universe spent 13 billion years evolving something more complex. That something is you. São Paulo, Brazil, has the world's largest urban private helicopter fleet, estimated at over 500 aircraft, because the city's traffic gridlock is so severe that wealthy residents use helicopters as a routine daily commute. Not for luxury, for practicality. The traffic is so bad that flying is functionally necessary for people who can afford it. São Paulo solved gridlock by going vertical and only giving that solution to rich people. Betelgeuse, the red supergiant in Orion, is so enormous that if it replaced our sun, its outer atmosphere would extend all the way to Jupiter's orbit, swallowing Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars entirely. The star you've been looking at in Orion's shoulder is large enough to swallow 4 planets from our solar system, including the one you live on. Stars exist at scales that are simply incompatible with human intuition. Tristan da Cunha, in the South Atlantic, is the most remote permanently inhabited island on Earth. The nearest inhabited land is 2,400 kilometers away. The only way to reach the island is a 6-day boat journey. About 250 people live there. They chose this. They are the most isolated community on the planet, and they have opted to remain exactly where they are. Pasta was not introduced to Italy by Marco Polo from China. That's a modern myth. Dried pasta was already documented in Sicily and Sardinia before Marco Polo was even born. Pasta likely developed independently in multiple regions simultaneously. Marco Polo's food origin story is not supported by the historical record. Italy's most defining food did not arrive by merchant caravan. It was already there. Moray eels have a second set of jaws hidden in their throat, pharyngeal jaws that shoot forward when they bite prey to grab the animal and drag it inward. The exoplanet WASP-1 B orbits so close to its host star that tidal forces are actively stretching it into an egg shape and stripping its atmosphere away. It will be completely consumed by the star in approximately 3 million years. There is a planet in the process of being eaten. Right now, slowly, over millions of years, a star is swallowing a world. The universe is not always a safe place to be a planet. Tabasco sauce is aged for up to 3 years in repurposed Jack Daniel's bourbon whiskey barrels on Avery Island, Louisiana. The barrels impart a subtle depth that distinguishes it from hot sauces aged in standard containers. The hot sauce in the tiny bottle with the green lid has been quietly aging in bourbon barrels for 3 years before it reaches your table. More effort went into that tiny bottle than most people will ever realize. Your brain produces between 12,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day. Research suggests that up to 95% of them are identical to thoughts you had the day before. You are running the same mental content on repeat, day after day, at a rate of tens of thousands of repetitions. Your inner monologue is less original than you think. Most of it is reruns. Pluto has blue skies. The same light scattering effect that makes Earth's sky blue also operates in Pluto's thin atmosphere of nitrogen and methane haze particles. As confirmed by NASA's New Horizons probe in 2015, the human body contains enough carbon to make roughly 9,000 pencils, enough iron to forge a 3-inch nail, and enough phosphorus to manufacture approximately 2,000 match heads, all accumulated gradually from food. You are made of pencils, nails, and matches. If someone disassembled you, they could stock a small hardware store. The human body as raw material is oddly practical. The Komodo dragon uses its forked tongue as a stereo smell detector. Each fork registers slightly different chemical concentrations simultaneously, telling the dragon not just what the smell is, but precisely which direction it's coming from. The tongue is a directional GPS for scent. The Komodo dragon smells in stereo. It knows where you are by which side of its tongue got the stronger reading. The James Webb Space Telescope operates cooled to minus 233 degrees Celsius to eliminate interference from its own infrared emissions. At that temperature, it is so sensitive it could theoretically detect the heat signature of a bumblebee at the distance of the moon. We built something that can feel the warmth of an insect from 384,000 kilometers away, and then we pointed it at galaxies 13 billion light years out. In Japan, Kit Kat bars are given as good luck charms before university entrance exams, because the name sounds similar to the Japanese phrase kidokatsu, meaning you will surely win. Japan turned a candy bar into a cultural ritual of encouragement. It's probably the only country where a chocolate snack has formal academic superstition attached to it. The human jaw can exert roughly 1,300 newtons of bite force, the strongest bite force relative to body weight of any primate. The muscles that close your jaw are powerful enough that sustained grinding can crack teeth under their own force. Dentists spend years dealing with the consequences of human jaws working against human teeth. You are strong enough to damage yourself by clenching. Most people do this in their sleep. The spookfish has mirror eyes instead of lens eyes. It focuses light using concave mirrors rather than glass like lenses, making it the only known vertebrate on Earth to see using the same optical principle as a reflecting telescope. An animal built an eye using mirrors, not lenses. Mirrors. The same principle Galileo used in a telescope. The deep ocean independently invented astronomy-grade optics millions of years before humans did. Ethiopia runs on a calendar with 13 months, 12 months of 30 days each, and a 13th month of 5 or 6 days. And it runs 7 to 8 years behind the Gregorian calendar. Ethiopia celebrated the year 2000 in what the rest of the world called 2007 or 2008. If you asked an Ethiopian colleague what year it is right now, you might get a different answer than you expected. Time is a social construct, and Ethiopia chose a different one. The most distant galaxies photographed by the Hubble Space Telescope are so far away that the light reaching us left them when the universe was less than 1 billion years old. That light has been traveling for over 13 billion years to reach the lens. Hubble didn't just photograph distant places. It photographed deep time. Every image of the farthest galaxies is a photograph of the early universe. An intact horseradish root is almost completely odorless. The fiery compound that gives it its kick, allyl isothiocyanate, only activates when cell walls are broken by grating or crushing. Cutting it releases nothing. The heat is a defense mechanism that only activates when the plant is being damaged. Horseradish figured out how to turn injury into a weapon. Approximately 8% of the human genome is made up of ancient viral DNA, remnants of viruses that infected our ancestors millions of years ago and permanently incorporated their genetic code into ours. 1 in 12 letters of your genetic code was written by a virus. You are not purely human at a genetic level. Part of your blueprint was authored by something that was trying to infect your ancestors, and it never left. The international dateline makes a large eastward detour around the island nation of Kiribati specifically because Kiribati demanded that the entire country share the same calendar day. They redrew the dateline around themselves. A small island nation decided it didn't want to be split across 2 different calendar days and successfully lobbied to have an international boundary moved. Their easternmost islands now ring in each new year first on Earth. Kiribati won. The oldest known written recipe ever discovered was found on a Sumerian clay tablet dated to around 1700 BCE. It's a recipe for beer. The very first time humans recorded a culinary technique in writing, they wrote down how to make alcohol. Humanity's debut in food literature was brewing. That tells you something about priorities that has remained consistent for 4,000 years. The human brain generates approximately 20 watts of electrical power continuously, enough to dimly illuminate a small LED light bulb, running entirely on the equivalent of about 300 calories per day. The most complex object in the known universe runs on fewer calories than a candy bar. Your brain is the most energy-efficient supercomputer ever built. It does more with 300 calories than any machine humans have created with any amount of power. Wolverines have been documented traveling over 60 kilometers in a single day through deep snow, an extraordinary range for any animal their size, driven almost entirely by the need to patrol territory and locate food. A wolverine is medium dog-sized. It covers marathon distances through waist-deep snow, daily, to fight bears over food. Every time someone describes an animal as ferocious, the comparison should be the wolverine. The Carolina Reaper chili is so hot that a single drop of its pure capsaicin extract would still be detectable by taste if dissolved in 3 million cups of water. And eating one whole pepper has sent people to the hospital with thunderclap headaches, a sudden, severe neurological response to the capsaicin overload. A pepper that can give you a medical emergency. Humans cultivated this deliberately because we wanted something hotter. Your body produces 2 to 3 million new red blood cells every second, and it simultaneously destroys an equal number in the spleen and liver, maintaining a perfect, continuous balance throughout your entire life. Millions of cells created and millions destroyed, every second, in perfect equilibrium, without any conscious input from you. Your body is running a biological manufacturing and recycling operation at a scale that makes any human factory look modest. The migratory monarch butterfly navigates using an internal clock synchronized with the sun's position. But on cloudy days when the sun isn't visible, it switches to a backup magnetic compass built into its antennae, 2 completely independent navigation systems. In a butterfly, the monarch butterfly has redundancy built into its navigational biology that most aircraft don't have. In 1999, NASA lost the $327 million Mars Climate Orbiter because one engineering team used metric units and another used imperial. The navigation data was off by a factor of 4.45 from the unit mismatch, sending the spacecraft directly into Mars's atmosphere at the wrong angle. It burned up. $327 million, lost to a unit conversion error. One of the most expensive typos in human history, the metric system has a legitimate argument to make after this one. Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 broke into 21 fragments before crashing into Jupiter in 1994. The impacts created visible scars in Jupiter's atmosphere larger than Earth itself, and the entire collision sequence was visible through amateur backyard telescopes. A planet-sized scar from a comet, visible from someone's backyard. The solar system occasionally puts on a show that requires no ticket and no professional equipment. Sriracha sauce was not invented in Thailand. It was created in California in 1980 by Vietnamese-American refugee David Tran, who named it after the Thai coastal city of Sriracha, where the style of chili sauce originates. The sauce named after a Thai city was invented in California by a Vietnamese immigrant. The most American story in condiment history somehow involves a Thai city name and a refugee from Vietnam. The reason men's and women's shirts button on opposite sides traces back to 19th century fashion. Wealthy women were dressed by right-handed servants who needed the buttons on the left side for easy fastening. The convention stuck long after servants disappeared. A fashion norm that affects billions of shirts sold every year exists because of how rich people's maids found it easier to dress them 200 years ago. Tradition is rarely logical when you trace it back. The hagfish can tie itself into a literal, overhand knot and slide that knot down along its body toward its tail. It uses this ability to escape predators' grip and to generate the leverage it needs when tearing chunks off prey. The solar wind travels at 400 to 800 kilometers per second and is powerful enough to create auroras on every planet with a magnetic field, not just Earth. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all have their own polar light shows. The northern lights are not an Earth exclusive. Multiple planets in our solar system have their own version of the aurora, generated by the same solar wind, scaled to their own magnetic fields. A bone marrow transplant can permanently change a recipient's blood type. Documented cases exist of patients switching completely from one blood type to their donor's type after the transplant takes hold. Something as fundamental as your blood type, the thing on your medical bracelet, can be changed by a medical procedure. The body's identity at the cellular level is more flexible than most people realize. Crocodiles have almost no muscle power to open their jaws. You can physically hold a crocodile's mouth shut with your bare hands. But their closing force exceeds 16,000 newtons, the strongest bite force ever measured in any living animal. The most dangerous part of the crocodile works in only one direction. Open easily, closes with catastrophic force. The asymmetry is the whole strategy. Sealand is a self-declared nation on an abandoned World War II sea platform 12 kilometers off the coast of England. It issues its own passports, its own currency, and its own nobility titles. At 550 square meters, it may be the world's smallest self-proclaimed country. Someone found an abandoned metal platform in the North Sea and decided that was enough to start a nation. And then they made themselves a prince. The audacity deserves some respect. In 2006, declassified CIA documents revealed that the U.S. government seriously planned in 1958 to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon. Project A-119. The purpose was a Cold War power demonstration. It was ultimately abandoned. The United States almost blew up the moon to impress the Soviets. Fingertip skin has about 2500 touch receptors per square centimeter, the highest sensory density in the human body. Your back is only about 7 per square centimeter. This is why you can read Braille with your fingers, but not with your shoulder blade. Your fingertips are the most sensitive instruments on your body, and most people use them to scroll through a phone all day. Peak biological precision deployed for memes. The human stomach can stretch from a resting volume of about 75 milliliters to hold up to 4 liters of food and liquid, a 50-fold increase in under 30 minutes during a large meal. Your stomach is not a fixed container. It is a flexible bag that can expand to 50 times its empty size on demand in half an hour. The human digestive system was clearly designed with Thanksgiving in mind. The flying fish can glide up to 50 meters through the air at speeds approaching 60 kilometers/h by spreading its enlarged pectoral fins like wings. It evolved this ability primarily as an escape mechanism from ocean predators. Fish escaping the ocean temporarily by flying. It didn't grow wings. It just held out its fins and trusted physics to do the rest. And physics delivered. The Maldives government has already purchased land in Sri Lanka and Australia as potential future relocation sites for its population. With an average elevation of just 1.5 meters above sea level, the entire country could become uninhabitable within this century. A government is preemptively buying land in other countries because it genuinely believes its own nation will be underwater. This is not a hypothetical. The contingency planning has already begun. Jupiter's volcanic moon, Io, resurfaces itself with fresh lava so constantly that it has virtually no impact craters. The geological record keeps getting overwritten. Io is the geologically youngest surface in the entire solar system, essentially brand new at all times because it never stops erupting. Io is simultaneously the most geologically active place in the solar system and the place with the shortest geological memory. Vieux Boulogne cheese from northern France was judged the world's smelliest cheese in a scientific study using an electronic nose. It beat out Epoisses, a cheese so notoriously pungent it has been banned from French public transportation. There is a cheese that is legally not allowed on French trains, and it still came second. What the actual winner smells like is a question best left unanswered. The human knee absorbs roughly 6 to 7 times your body weight with each running stride. A 70-kilogram runner's knee joint faces nearly 500 kilograms of force, hundreds of times per minute. Running is your skeleton doing a controlled experiment in structural engineering with every footfall. The knee is doing extraordinary work with a design that is, unfortunately, not quite up to the task over a lifetime. The tarsier, a tiny nocturnal primate from Southeast Asia, has eyes so oversized they are literally immovable, fixed completely in their sockets. To compensate, tarsiers can rotate their heads nearly 180 degrees in each direction, almost like an owl. It evolved eyes too big to move and then evolved a neck that spins to make up for it. The tarsier solved one problem by creating a different one and then solved that one too. Macau, the former Portuguese territory in China, generates more gambling revenue per year than Las Vegas, making it the highest-grossing gambling jurisdiction on Earth, concentrated into an area of just 33 square kilometers. Las Vegas is the global symbol of gambling, and it is not even close to being the world's biggest gambling city. Macau is running the same business at a scale Las Vegas cannot match, in a fraction of the space. Your scent memory bypasses the brain's usual information relay station. The olfactory cortex connects directly to the hippocampus and amygdala, the memory and emotion centers, which is why smells trigger vivid emotional memories more powerfully and more instantly than any other sense. A smell can take you back 30 years in a split second with a clarity no photograph can match. Your nose has a direct line to your past that no other sense has access to. If the sun were shrunk to the size of a single white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would still be the size of the continental United States. Our entire solar system, 8 planets, countless moons, the asteroid belt, reduced to a microscopic cell, sitting in a galaxy the size of a country, and then zoom out further. If the entire observable universe were compressed to the size of Earth, our solar system would be smaller than a single atom. There is no number large enough to make this feel real. Aspartame, one of the world's most common artificial sweeteners, is harmless for most people, but in the gut it breaks down into phenylalanine, which is toxic to people with a condition called phenylketonuria. This is why every aspartame-containing product is legally required to carry a warning label. A sweetener in your diet soda is perfectly safe for 99% of people and potentially dangerous for a small subset. The label is there for a reason. Most people have never read it. The fastest movements the human body can make are eye saccades, the rapid flicks your eyes make between fixation points. They move so fast that the blur they create is literally invisible to the person making them. Your brain suppresses the visual smear during each saccade, so you never see the world streak. You are actively blinding yourself thousands of times per day, and your brain is editing out the gaps so seamlessly you have no idea. Ceres, the dwarf planet in the asteroid belt, has mysterious bright spots on its surface. NASA's Dawn spacecraft identified them as sodium carbonate deposits left behind when subsurface brine seeped up and evaporated, suggesting a layer of salty liquid water underground. There is a dwarf planet in our own asteroid belt that may have liquid salt water underground. The solar system keeps hiding water in unexpected places. White chocolate contains 0 cocoa solids. It is made entirely from cocoa butter, milk, and sugar. Strict chocolate definitions and some food regulatory bodies argue it doesn't technically qualify as chocolate at all. White chocolate is not chocolate by the strictest definition. It is a cocoa butter delivery system with a strong PR department, and it tastes great regardless of what category it belongs to. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia sits 120 meters below sea level and holds the hottest average year-round temperature of any inhabited place on Earth, along with active lava lakes and pools of sulfuric acid. It is the most hostile landscape that humans continuously explore on the planet. Scientists go there on purpose, regularly. There are people whose job involves visiting an active sulfuric acid landscape that is also the hottest place on Earth. They do this voluntarily. Your hair locks in a chemical record of your life. It grows at a consistent rate and captures what you've eaten, what medications you've taken, and what substances have been in your system, month by month. Forensic scientists can reconstruct a detailed picture of a person's diet and substance use from a single strand, going back as far as the hair is long. Your hair is a biological autobiography being written continuously, whether you want it to be or not. The bar-tailed godwit holds the record for the longest non-stop bird migration. Individual birds fly up to 12,200 kilometers from Alaska to New Zealand in about 9 days without landing, eating, or sleeping, fueled entirely by stored fat. 9 days, non-stop. No food, no sleep, no landing. A shorebird the size of a pigeon crosses the Pacific Ocean on body fat alone. The bar-tailed godwit is the most extraordinary endurance athlete on Earth, and it gets almost no credit. Neptune has the fastest winds in the solar system, despite being the farthest planet from the sun and receiving almost no solar energy. Its storms generate wind speeds exceeding 2,100 kilometers/h, roughly 3 times faster than Jupiter's Great Red Spot. The coldest, most distant planet in the solar system has the fastest winds. Neptune has no business having those wind speeds, and it has them anyway. Bhutan banned television and the internet until 1999, becoming one of the last nations on Earth to introduce both simultaneously. Yet for decades, it has consistently ranked among the world's happiest countries by its own government measured gross national happiness surveys. A country that didn't have television or internet until 1999 has been reporting higher happiness levels than countries that had both for decades. Whether that's correlation or causation is a question worth sitting with. Drop a comment telling me which one hit you the hardest, or just say whatever's on your mind. That works too. And if you haven't liked the video yet, now's your moment. Until next time.